Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today I'm going to be going over some hacking tools and also the security news of the week. But, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, as I always like doing a little bit of Q&A as well. So, hello, James. Good to see you. Just started up the stream a little bit later than usual, but it's kind of been consistently that way. Once I know that, Killian is off doing other things, then I tend to schedule a little bit after usual, just so I can get a couple last minute things nailed down. And today I wanted to talk about a little device that I think is really interesting that I've seen come down in price a lot and has started to make me, well, for one, buy a bunch of them and see what they're useful for. And for two, kind of be interested in what you can do with an operating system, either on a keychain or something like that. So I have, as many other hackers do, an interest in having easy access to operating systems. So I want to be able, oh, my hat's not straight. I want to be able to kind of like spin up an operating system, any sort of operating system I want at a moment's notice. And usually the way of doing this is like a USB drive. And I have a lot of USB drives. Back when I was press and going to conferences all the time, under like my press pass, I would always go to the press room, and without fail, they would have tons and tons and tons of promotional USB sticks meant for journalists that questionably maybe had malware on it. And of course, out of the goodness of my own heart and as a researcher to protect the poor other journalists, I just took all of them, just to prevent them from accidentally infecting themselves. So I wiped these drives. I then started using them to host operating systems. But, there's a lot of variability. Some of them are very slow. When you pop them open, some of them are actually just SD cards that are soldered down to a chip. Like, it's crazy to see the internals of some of these things, and they act very differently. So some of them are good, some of them are bad. It's a little bit of a frustrating experience, but it is probably the best way that a hacker could walk up to a computer and then just begin, like booting into a Linux operating system or something like that whenever they want. I know that at my community college I used to go to, they had a hard-coded sequence that allowed you to boot any operating system you want in all the school computers. So I could just go there, plug in a USB stick, and boot into Linux and start doing Wi-Fi hacking stuff or other things I needed to do for a demo, which was really cool. So without further ado, I want to show off these things. Sorry, I'm organizing my own stream today. There we go. All right, so these little UDP memory chips, these chip on board style, are really interesting to me. If you've been on AliExpress like I am every day, then you might have noticed that these things have really come down in price. And this goes against the conventional wisdom of never order a thumb drive or USB device from AliExpress. There's like multiple reasons why people typically don't do that. So I kind of shied away from these things until I found that I needed access to a USB stick for like operating systems and things like that. And I was like, wow, these are like $1, $2, and like some of them are like 64 gigabytes. Like, even if they're kind of slow, it kind of seems useful to just have storage that's that cheap. So I went ahead and made a couple purchases and very quickly realized that this design, while versatile, I'm using these micro COB, the micro UDPs. These are able to be brought up to 128 gigabytes, USB 2.0. They're pretty cool. They're pretty useful, honestly. And being able to boot into, yes, Arch Linux, if you want, average Joe, is something that I think a lot of hackers would be interested in. So on my AliExpress journeys, this is the kind of hacker's tool that I think might actually be a good deal now from AliExpress, to buy a whole bunch of these and then maybe be able to have a library of operating systems ready to use whenever you want. This really intrigued me because like 64 gigabytes for, I don't know, a couple dollars, and then being able to have a bunch of these, that's not a big investment for being able to solve a problem that's been, kind of dogging me for a little bit. Like, how do I spin up an operating system if I really need it in a super space efficient way where I don't need to constantly be flashing a USB drive? And even USB drives are huge compared to these little suckers. So from a hacker's toolkit perspective, what can we do with these little things? Well, first, if you think you can just plug this right into your USB drive, you are sadly mistaken. It will not fit. It is not thick enough. So you can't, unfortunately, just buy these off AliExpress and immediately put them into your computer that you want to boot Arch on or something like that. So I was interested in this form factor. I did a little bit of research. I was like, okay, cool. And after I got them, I found on Thingiverse a number of 3D printed designs that you can use to adapt these into something you can actually plug into a computer. So this actually was my favorite one. So I think that the way that I am going to set up my system is I'm going to have a teeny tiny little box that has all of my little chip on board USB devices. Like they're so small. They're the smaller than the size of a postage stamp. They're really, really tiny. Well, I mean, the size of the inside of a USB drive, like, and not even thick enough to interact with one. So very, very small. So I'm going to pack those all together into a little box. And then I'm going to have one or maybe two or whatever adapters that allow you to give it the thickness that it needs to plug into a computer. And then also a little bit of grip. So I don't know that it's fully necessary for me to have this be like a ring. I think that that's just cool to be like plug it in with your ring finger and then just leave it there. I also just think that honestly, this one's a good design because it just has the single piece of plastic that lets you get the thickness you need without doing anything over the sides. So the device slides in here. It is a little bit funny printing this because there's a 90-degree hang right here, and my printer did it just fine. But if your settings aren't dialed in and it starts to sag right here, then I think it might cause problems. But for me anyway, printing on my Bamboo printer that you guys recommended to me, thank you very much. This printed out great. So this for making it so you can plug in like that if necessary. And also I think for like geocaching or something like that might be really cool. Geocaching is actually one of the original reasons I got this. I went on a hike to the top of a mountain and I really wanted to leave like a bunch of information inside this ammo can that people had been like leaving notes and other things in, or just, see if anyone's brave enough to plug it in. So, either as a social experiment or whatever else, I think this one takes the cake, but I wanted to show off some of the other options. If you want to make police really nervous, you could do this. You could put it in a butterfly knife kind of design. I did not do this for a couple reasons. One, I don't need any more like negative attention for the suspicious things that I already do. This is like too much for me. Two, I do think that it might actually provide too much material on the sides, like on this side and on that side. I could be wrong. What are us nerds talking about? We're talking about making super cheap USB devices so that we can boot operating systems, or maybe like load something onto a computer, or maybe take something off of a computer. It doesn't matter, but we want to do it for like less than $5. And like these things, again, I'm not sure. This one definitely wins for style, 100%, and it folds up pretty nice. But for me, like what's cool about these little chip on board designs is like you're actually able to really get a lot of them in a super small space. So this is just like having a regular USB stick. This one didn't do it for me. This one is interesting. This is a little thumb drive case. This one I think is also going to be very successful. I actually haven't printed this one yet, but it has all the hallmarks of success. And I think that if I'm being more realistic, this is the one. It's just the ring minus the ring. It's just the interface part minus the ring. This one will get you exactly what you need. It's super tiny, just enough support material to be able to make it so it can be plugged in. So I really like this one. And there's also a mod for a key port. Actually, I want to look at this one. Yeah, okay, never mind. Yeah, no, this is fine. There was another one that I printed that had a little bit of side material on the side here, inside here, and it made it actually a very, very tight squeeze to plug into a computer. So there's a couple of these models I don't recommend, but these ones all so far have been the good ones. So if you have a key port, keyboard is this cool little device where you can organize all your keys so they kind of like shoot out like a, I don't know, like it basically takes like a big ring of jingly keys and turns it into like a Swiss Army knife of keys. And it's cool. A lot of people like it. They had these at DEF CON a couple of years ago. And I remember they were just like, a lot of people were going crazy on them. I think they might have been at DEF CON last year too. I didn't honestly get a chance to walk around too much, but yeah, this was something that I thought would be, if you do have a keyboard, it's cool to be able to just add some operating systems to that. But overall idea here is if you print one of these designs, like one of these very minimal ones, and then you have a little box to carry around these super cheap little chip on board designs, you could actually have like 64 gigabytes worth of operating system space and just boot from that. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee a great experience. And the other thing is, all right, let's talk about the conventional wisdom of why would you not buy a USB stick off AliExpress? Well, like we said, there could be some supply chain concerns, and also it could be cheating you. They could all be flashed with firmware that tells them to report a larger storage capacity than they actually have. This is super, super common. So how do you detect this? Well, generally, it is advised to do things like, let me turn off my screen for a second. It's advised to do things like stress test a small sample. And there's a number of different tools, which I haven't used yet because they're built for Windows. The one time, like being a Mac user, like was not beneficial, was on this random USB testing software. There's like nothing, it's all for Windows and also for Linux, but just hard enough to do for macOS that's annoying. But if you stress test these USB devices, this is what you'll often find. You'll get 100 and whatever like gigabyte drive. You'll start putting files on it, and after like 8 gigabytes, it just corrupts them. It just will not save anything. That is one of the cases where you'll have like an 8 gigabyte SD card that's flashed with firmware that makes it believe that it's like a 128 gigabyte for like flash drive or something like that. So you can set arbitrary file sizes basically through the firmware, and that is something that a lot of these companies love to do. So it's highly advised that before you invest in a lot of these, maybe buy like a sample or two, check to make sure that even though they're cheap, they do have the correct amount of storage. Because if you start hosting an operating system on it, and that operating system is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it goes over the limit of, let's say, 8 gigabytes, and then all of a sudden, all the new data that's being saved to the operating system is being corrupted because what you thought was a 64 gigabyte is actually an 8, you're going to have a bad time. So just be aware that that does happen. I have not stress tested mine yet. I've actually loaded one operating system, but it's a super tiny OS. So as a result, I actually haven't tested this limit yet. So I will let you know whether or not the ones I bought are scams. So far, so good though. But this is the primary thing to be aware of if you're buying these sort of tools off of AliExpress. But anytime one of these drops below like $5 or less, I like to bring it on the stream and talk about how you could integrate this into your own hacking tools. So if you want operating systems, if you want to just have USB storage on tap, again, these cannot be used directly. You do need an adapter, but it kind of strikes me as the same way that like an SD card, like you need an adapter to access. This one is just 3D printed, and you can mod them into these really cool, super tiny devices that are smaller than at least the average USB device. So if you've been carrying around a bunch of USB sticks that have operating systems on them, I beg you to consider one of these. They're smaller, they're very handy, and they're made for these sorts of designs. I actually think that this one, oh yeah, cool. It's for the large and the smaller designs. So anyway, you can check those out on AliExpress or other websites that sell these chip on board designs, but just realize they are cheap now, and that might be the best way to start getting into operating system booting on random computers you have access to. All right. Also, hello to everybody that just joined. I fill it up and see if the data is readable. Yeah, okay, I'm going to be honest, James. If I just put a big video file on each one of these that's like the size that it is supposed to be, I really have absolutely no excuses for not testing these. So thank you for reminding me that the easiest way to test these is just to attempt to transfer a large file. The stress testing programs that I was mentioning for testing these are usually checking like speed, like write access, like all these other things that like might be if you were getting like a cheaper or older chip, or like, you know, maybe it was damaged in some way or like had some sort of error. It's like those are the kinds of tools that would go and actually check the drive more thoroughly and make sure that you know what kind of performance you're getting out of it, so you can compare what it was sold to you as. But again, if you just want to test it to see if you've been just scammed and given the wrong size, but flashed with custom firmware that thinks it's a larger size, just transfer a super big file, and I think you'll get your answer pretty quickly. And you can pretty much infer the speed as well. Oh, and hello. Yeah, so new updates on Meshtastic and potential regulations. So Meshtastic is a lot of fun. It is a mesh network that allows you to combine with other nearby devices. And I'm going to bring up Meshtastic real quick. And lets you basically create encrypted networks over relatively large areas that yeah, like you can send messages over, you can send commands over. We have done a number of different things, and also it can be used to like trigger devices. So I want to see, can it actually, no, okay. Let me go back to Meshtastic. Meshtastic map. Okay, cool. I'm going to share this again. So yeah, one thing that I really need to do is I really need to figure out exactly where I can get a bunch of wireless radios for Europe. So the regulations around this sort of radio frequency stuff have been up in the air for a while. And it's kind of unclear with the election happening and like the change in things, whether or not there's going to be a ton of interest in like regulating this space, or whether it's, you know, going to be chopped up and given to businesses and people won't be able to use it anymore. So there really is a lot of questions. There really are a lot of questions around like what the next step is for regulations around Meshtastic. Let me see if I can pause. Can I just, okay. Hold on. Let me go to an area where there's going to be a lot of Meshtastic nodes. All right, cool. We are in Los Angeles. We're already in LA. Okay, cool. So let me find one of my nodes. I think I got a couple here, and I just want to show off like what kind of things are out there. So this is like typical Meshtastic network. This is Southern California, and these are nodes that are sharing their location as observed by a device that's forwarding this information to a database that creates this map. So basically we have a couple collectors in the Los Angeles area that are listening for node information, including where that node is located, and then forwarding that information onto a map so people can kind of get an idea of where these are and what the density is. Now, the actual density is much higher. I know for a fact actually that there's a lot more nodes out here than are being reported. Some of them aren't sharing their location, and some of them for some reason are just not included in this map. I don't really know why. I think that maybe the positioning of the collectors for this map is maybe not as ideal as some of the other ones. But either way, there's a number of nodes out here that I have placed that are currently like forwarding packets and creating ad hoc networks that fluctuate over time. So as new nodes are added or as clients are passing through that are acting as repeaters, you create these ad hoc networks that flow over the area and can achieve like really incredible distances. Now, the problem here is that you need to manage flooding. So it's called a managed flood routing system, where basically each message gets a certain number of hops with it, a maximum of 7. And that is how many times the packet gets to be repeated before it dies on the network. So while it is possible for a client over here to reach a client over here, most of the time, if it hops through a couple packets, if someone like in this area were to set up a whole bunch of like router infrastructure that kind of like bounced the message around and exhausted its hops, it might actually die in an area with a bad network configuration. So lots of really interesting and cool stuff that crops up with Meshtastic when it starts to become scaled. I'm talking to the people at SoCal MeshNet to talk about security vulnerabilities and like growing pains and other things at the upcoming Chaos Communication Congress. So I'll have more updates on this, but currently my biggest focus is basically buying radios for Europe. So you cannot use the 915 megahertz radios that we use in the United States and Europe. It's like 800 something megahertz there. So I'm going to have to hop on AliExpress and buy literally like 200 European style radios. And I basically have to give them away at the end of the conference when I leave, because I can't legally use them in the United States. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So learning a lot about regulations in Europe. But again, Meshtastic is kind of like a loophole where we have these devices that are transmitting encrypted packets in ad hoc networks. Like typically that's not supposed to be allowed, but because it's like industrial scientific spectrum and you don't need a license to operate in it, it gets around the fact that ham radio operators are not allowed to transmit encrypted messages because you don't have to be licensed to use it. That is a big loophole. We are a country of loopholes. I mean, I know a lot of things here have loopholes that make it so you can do them if you really want to. But whether or not this continues to have a crackdown or people start allocating the spectrum up for commercial purposes, I think that actually might be more likely in the upcoming administration. Like, I don't really know what's going to happen here, and it is going to affect this very, very popular community kind of networking thing that has cropped up all over the country and I guess probably all over the world, depending on what the regulations are for using these radio frequencies. Let's see. You could actually hide one of these in a USB port and it would not be easily visible. Yeah, actually so we were talking about these like chip on board designs. Yeah, they're so small that if you were to hide them or just make a super minimal little backing to it, I think you could make such a small device that it would be almost impossible to see. Like just even taking one of those designs, cutting off the back and just super gluing on the correct amount of width to the back of the design, I think would have just as much of an effect. So like, for example, if you had one of these and you just cut off the back and just like glued on this part right here, I think you would make an almost undetectable USB device that could be put in a USB port. Again, lots of applications for this that hackers love. Taking stuff off computers, putting stuff on computers, like all that fun stuff. So anyway, if y'all have some interesting experience with that, please let me know. I have a Feather LoRa from Adafruit. What else do I need? Yeah, so actually the Feather LoRa was one of the things that inspired me to work on our own backpacks for LoRa devices. So when I first started talking about LoRa, I wasn't talking about, and LoRa, by the way, is the networking protocol, super long range. LoRa stands for long range, that allows Meshtastic to run. So Meshtastic is a protocol built on top of LoRa. And I really got interested in working with these radios when I'd been hearing about it. I got a couple devices. I was playing around with it. But then I saw that Adafruit had picked a specific board or like a specific RFM like 95 board. And I was like, okay, we're just going to use that one. Like it's cheap on AliExpress. I can buy like 100 of them for like less than $4 a piece. That is the point at which I'm like, yes, let's do it. Let's try it. So Adafruit's decision like made me make our own Nugget backpacks. Actually, this is one of them right here that has integrated LoRa. And oh yeah, here's one of the chips. And this is actually the chip that's on the Feather. So this was our badge design, which we are going to be releasing at an upcoming conference. And it's got just that little postage stamp size LoRa module, the RFM95 that Adafruit also uses, and then an ESP32S3. I don't remember what the microcontroller is on the Feather. I think it's an S2, and the S2, unfortunately, as far as we can see, doesn't support Meshtastic, or it hasn't been like easily compiled for it. So you would need to like custom compile Meshtastic for it in order for it to run on that. However, I have been able to just combine like this radio with just like a Raspberry Pi Pico and flash it and get it working. So in order to get Meshtastic running, you just need like a microcontroller and then also a LoRa radio for it to interface with. And it's preferred that that microcontroller is like an ESP32S3. That's the most common one that's used. It's the best supported, and it has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, native USB, everything that you need to have a good experience with it. Yeah, the RF95 and the ESP32S2. The ESP32 is also supported, I believe, but I recommend using the ESP32S3 because it certainly works really well in all my tests. And a lot of very, very popular designs that are supported by Meshtastic all use the ESP32S3 as their base. This is going to be like Heltec, like whatever else. So like it's very, very common. But there's also some Nordic semiconductor chips that are really powerful that also are supported. I don't mess with them because that's not my thing. All right, let me go back to the screen and let's start talking about news this week. So we've got a couple things that are interesting. One of them is a security researcher talking about how they got access to the underlying operating system Sandbox with ChatGPT. So they were able to extract information, and there's no privacy or security issues really here. And this might be a thing that is done by design, honestly. Like OpenAI has basically made it so that you can upload files to its sandbox, execute code in its sandbox. You can fish around the sandbox. You can both upload and download things from that environment. And that allows you, for example, to see like the playbook that it has to work with, and other things that like might be either instructing the AI or that it might be like getting information from. Now, in this case, like there's not really information that's stored here that is sensitive, it seems, but in other deployments of this, there could be. So while this isn't like a security problem and it's not something that you really need to worry about, it is two things. One, it's something that you can play around with to kind of discover more about how this works internally. What does the sandbox look like? How is it locked down? And this is what I think was really cool. They were able to do administrative actions like listing files. They were able to upload files, which was, again, very interesting. And there are limitations. For example, you cannot access the root folder, the etc shadow, which holds passwords, like all the common sense things that an operating system you would want to lock down from like a public access are done here. So a lot of this, as it mentions here, was disclosed in the past, but executing Python scripts, uploading, downloading, like this could be a problem in an installation that has, like, for example, prompt information or user information stored in these containers. Now, it doesn't seem, again, like this is something that is currently a problem, but it's just kind of noting that like you can poke around this, you can explore, you can find kind of the limits to this and see if you can push past them. But also, you could potentially use this technique to extract information, sensitive information that might be in like a custom build or a company's ChatGPT-based solution. Is that going to be an issue in the future? I don't really know, but the fact that this is so wide open does provide great transparency. So there are some good notes for OpenAI, making it possible for researchers who are wanting to explore this space. All right, so we talked a little bit about this last week, but this is really ramping up with Thanksgiving approaching. So there are a bunch of websites who have various vulnerabilities. These will be like WordPress or other things that get taken over. And basically the primary motivation is not to fully take over the website and repurpose it. It is to insert sections of the website that are highly SEO optimized and use the kind of credit and longevity of the existing website to lure people in. Now, that is the case in some of these. There's also SEO-based attacks where they will create very like similar looking names with like .shop or .other things that make it look like it's a Black Friday sale or something like that, like a pop-up kind of website like that's specifically for a sale, but they're purely meant for stealing credit card information. So it gets sent over Stripe, and then presumably this information is going to be used in some sort of future like phishing attack or something. But yeah, fairly sophisticated, can prey on existing websites or be hosted on one of these very realistic looking websites that then is heavily promoted via SEO. So if you do a search for like whatever brand Black Friday sale, this might be, the result directly after the official website, or sometimes it might even be before the official website. And it might say ad like all small in the corner, but most people don't notice that. And I was listening to a case recently of like an elderly person who called like the wrong number on Amtrak because of an SEO boosting scam, where like they basically made it so it was so easy for the scammer to get in there and like present a fake website when you're doing a search, that it's like the first or second thing that comes in and the ad isn't really clear. Also, if you're undercutting the price just a little bit, just enough to be realistic and people feel like they're saving, then maybe they do buy it, from a website they haven't shopped on before, provided that website has either been around for a while or like looks legitimate. Sales get people excited. And I think that that's what these financially motivated hackers are kind of taking advantage of. The fact that people might shop at websites they haven't been to before, and the fact that these SEO scams really make it easy to appear first to certain groups of people. So this is believed to be a Chinese-based threat actor. It's not totally clear what's going to be done with these stolen credit cards, but obviously it is not a good idea to enter information into one of these .top or .shop websites. You should be very careful about that and only try to use official brand websites if you're going to be buying directly. If not, if you're hunting for deals, it's kind of all bets are off. Just be very careful and look out for these, because this is thousands of different websites out there, 4,700 fake shopping sites that you're up against. So be careful. Try to verify as best you can. Look for other people talking about scams, and just realize that these look really realistic and they will be continuing to pop up throughout the holiday season. All right. So poor Google's cookies. I'm not going to spend too much on this, but we've been talking about how there have been some of these info stealers that really, really, really want to steal cookies. And they want that because then it could be the first step to selling access to somebody's information, or initial access broker trying to make a sale of access to a corporate network or something like that. So this could be the key. And Google has really gone out of their way to make it kind of difficult to grab these cookies. But info stealers continue to adapt and find ways to get this information regardless of those updates. So again, not a lot of new information here. It's just kind of the back and forth between Google and these info stealer developers who are desperate to be able to get some of these cookies and pass them on while they're still active. Again, if that happens, then it could allow them to have access to your accounts, including like email or other things that could let them basically sell that access to a broker who's going to make a lot of money off of whatever access you have to your company, to maybe your own personal finances, or to the people who trust you. Oftentimes, people who are in a position of trust can have their emails exploited or something like that and then sold so that phishing scams can be conducted against all the people who might actually have resources. So even if you're broke, if you know someone who isn't and they trust you, that could be enough to be targeted in a scam like this. All right, next up, we have some prison sentences. So a little bit of contrast this week in prison sentences. We have somebody who tried to extort the US healthcare industry. And we also have somebody who, well, we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's just say that the sentences kind of surprised me a little bit. But a hacker is getting 10 years in prison for going after this healthcare organization and making it so that they were unable to provide services for at least a period of time, stole the personal data of 132,000 people. And yeah, when we talk about access brokers, like this guy just bought network access to a computer server of a medical clinic in Georgia on a darknet marketplace. That's what happened. So when I say that there's multiple levels of cybercrime that are happening between info stealers that are just trying to grab cookies, and then people who like sift through those cookies and find out if there's any gems in there worth kind of passing on, these two stories are literally like linked together because they're the same. They're just like the active like story of the cybercrime marketplace. So he bought access to servers at a medical clinic in Georgia, and then started exfiltrating information. Obviously, this was really sensitive information, and then attempted to do like a ransomware exploitation. Also, apparently bought access to a Georgia-based police department server. So lots of stuff you could do with access to police networks. Obviously, we were talking last week about how people with access to police email addresses are able to send these fake emergency requests for basically anybody's information to tech companies like Google or Apple to just dump the data of a specific cell phone. So having gained this sort of access, it means that this guy would have had a lot of power. He would have been able to use this for all sorts of things. So obviously very, very severe to be breaking into a police department network. Going after healthcare is also something that a lot of ransomware people do not do. So these ransomware affiliates will typically do something like they'll buy the software that they're going to use. They will buy the access to a server that somebody else has got via an info stealer or a phishing attack. And then they just set themselves up. They attack the server. They run through the process of trying to exploit that organization. And then, they usually walk away with a bunch of cryptocurrency that they have to go launder, and they do a bad job. Then they usually get caught. So this guy got caught, and he's looking at 10 years in prison. That is appropriate, I think. Like, if you are going after people who are seeking medical treatment, and especially if you're trying to basically just get access to their private information and hang it over them, that you're going to release it in the most horrible way, that is obviously a danger to society. And hopefully the ease of access to this tool, like literally all this guy needed to do this was money and a computer with access to a darknet marketplace. By being able to buy access to these devices, like, it's really dangerous, because it means people who are reckless but have enough cash to fund this sort of operation can get started in pretty major breaches without needing to code and without needing to have the skills to actually like go through the process of getting into the computers in the first place. They just need to have enough tech experience to take advantage of that access and use tools that are commercially available to go through the entire ransomware process. Yeah, 10 years is heavy for sure, but I mean, I kind of feel like for one, like a lot of these sentences are reduced, and like by that it's like ends up being like 8 or something like that. And also just going after people's like healthcare data, a lot of ransomware people are not reckless. They select targets that are not critical infrastructure, and healthcare is considered critical infrastructure. It's just like, if you were to hit like a mortgage house or like a financial institution or like something like that, they've got tons of money. They've got other things to do. They don't know what's going on, and they don't care. And they're probably just going to pay you. Like there was a run of hackers attacking like mortgage organizations. And this was really successful because like there was no multinational police task forces being stood up to go after like ransomware people that were attacking like mortgage houses. Instead, there were very active task forces that were going up against people going into critical infrastructure and potentially damaging it or taking it down. So I think that like 10 years is for sure heavy. Like it's bad, but like going after critical infrastructure is really stupid, man. Like you once you gain access and you're like, oh, this is a police department, or oh, this is the public transit system of the city of San Francisco. Like you really need to like just do a gut check and be like, do I want the heat? Is the smoke in this situation worth like the potential financial gain? And I think most people will be like, no. Like shutting down the BART system in San Francisco, which actually like happened. Like there was an attack against it where a ransomware affiliate just like bought access and ran the stuff. And then they're like, oh my God, like I don't want any of this. And they walked away. So the city couldn't get access to the data because like they couldn't get in touch with the ransomware person because they were just like, this is too hot for me. I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So yeah, like there's definitely examples being made here. Hospitals, schools, libraries used to be off limits, not in 2024. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like that's why these tools have become so easy to access that if you're just like some person with some cryptocurrency, you can buy a whole setup to run these attacks, and you just get a list of victims that are keep constantly coming in from these info stealers that are distributed everywhere in torrents. So it's just a cycling industry, and until the risks become a little bit more so than for the really reckless people that just like, just can buy access and just do whatever, I think they're going to keep increasing these sentences and make it so that it is less and less profitable to do these sorts of attacks, especially ones against critical infrastructure. I mean, like, oh my God. All right. So for our next story, we're going to talk about an extension of the telecom incident. So we recently reported that the wiretapping system had been wiretapped. unfortunate. Who could have foreseen that? So the US government has these mandated devices that are used to comply with legal intercept requests. So if a certain device is deemed to be the subject of an investigation and it's approved, then these are the devices that are used to actually carry out that data collection. They're connected to major telecoms networks, and the government is supposed to have access to them, but they should have been more specific. The government did have access to them, but the government of China, which was not the intention. The problem here, obviously, is that there are these crazy, complicated, bespoke networks at these telecommunication companies that don't exist anywhere else in the world. They're super complicated, they're very niche, and they're difficult for people to even understand what's going on, let alone like to flush out a threat actor. So while this has been kind of now known for a while that this is happening, it's still being a problem for these telecommunication providers to get rid of the hackers in the network here that are able to access the information. It seems that based on this more recent report that CISA and the FBI are confirming that China had access to the private communications of various government officials. So that means anything going over the network, it could be text messages, it could be like just metadata, who they're talking to, all that information was available to the Chinese government. So apparently this only actually happened for a, quote, limited number of government officials. I mean, that is a very cushy way of saying that. I mean, unless it was literally all government officials, this could be any number from 2 to 75% of the US government. So I don't know what that means, but this was a substantial effort. They breached multiple US broadband providers, and they were able to get a really good perspective on what was going on in the United States when it comes to people's private communications. It just keeps getting worse and worse. Like the more we learn about this, the more it seems like this was a highly targeted intelligence gathering operation that used the complexity of these telecommunication providers' networks to mask these attacks for a good amount of time. This was for months or longer that this access went on. So, I mean, imagine having an inside track on all the communications going over US cellular networks, and probably also being able to do things like geolocate where someone was, or figure out what area someone is, or at the very least figure out who someone is talking to. I think most people, maybe this is true, maybe this is not. You guys can tell me. I think most people still use text messaging. I don't, and I haven't for a really long time. So I get confused when I get text messages that aren't from a business telling me like my car's ready to pick up or something. But like I do most things over Messenger. But assuming that these government officials were still using texting, then everything that the carrier had access to, potentially the Chinese government did too. So that is obviously a pretty big deal. And a large espionage effort. And again, it does seem to be an ongoing cleanup effort to get the Chinese-linked hackers out of these telecommunication networks. I'm so tired of these. So guess who is getting free credit monitoring? 122 million people. So whenever one of these business-to-business data aggregators gets breached, it is brutal. Demand Science, in this case, formerly Pure Incubation, which sounds gross, is a B2B demand generation company, and they are data aggregators. That means they scrape, buy, collect, they do whatever. They're the problem, basically. They're taking all this disparate information out there that's all spread around and concentrating it, distilling it, and offering it up for sale. So that allows private businesses to buy your information and target you. That could be political candidates or whatever else. They just want to know what you're into. So that's going to be your browsing history from your internet service provider. It's going to be like public profiles. It's going to be all sorts of stuff that gets compiled and processed into these data profile. So it's supposed to be for generating leads or marketing information, but it's really just kind of invasive, honestly. So in February 2024, threat actor began selling 132.8 million records on breach forums. So the response from this company was kind of funny. Based on the post you forwarded from a black hat hacking crime forum, we immediately activated our security and incident response protocols. All our systems are 100% operational. We have not found any indication that a hack or breach in any of our systems or data has occurred. All are secured behind firewall /VPN /access control /intrusion detection systems, BTW. We are continuing to monitor the situation, so it would not be appropriate to expand further at this point. So limited data set has been made available, which corresponds to a couple dollars. I don't think Bleeping Computer is in the business of paying $8 to anyone. but it looks like Troy Hunt is. So he published a blog post confirming that the data is authentic. So apparently it also is from a system that was decommissioned 2 years ago. You never know when your servers are going to end up. I remember I did an interview with somebody at Canary Tokens who was talking about all these weird places that these basically tag devices had appeared. So Canary Token is basically like a tracking link. And one of the applications is you can put it at the root file of a server. And then when it starts up or whatever, as soon as it accesses the internet, it'll call out and basically let you know that it's there. This is useful for like determining if people are accessing the root server or whatever else. So if you touch this file, it's programmed to automatically call out and hit the server. So at one point, a client that had put this on their root server, like had it ping from like Moscow, Russia. And basically this decommissioned server was supposed to be wiped, but instead it wasn't wiped. It was sent to Russia and recovered. And when someone accessed the root of the server, it triggered the Canary token and went back. So you never know where these might originate from. It could have been a decommissioned server that was accessible via the internet, or it could have been one that was scrapped and just not properly disposed of and ended up somewhere where someone was able to recover it. I think that honestly, based on my experiences at Goodwill, I have gone in and picked up a fully used time capsule that still has all of the original data that was easily able to be recovered. And I was like, wow, I know everything about this woman's life. Like, I know she works in the entertainment industry. Here are scripts. Here are things that like are definitely not public information. All of this stored on a time capsule that wasn't properly wiped. So I'm not saying that that's what happened here, but when we talk about like, you know, a decommissioned server or something, or a decommissioned device that then ends up coming back to haunt someone, like you never know where some of these servers might go if they're especially managed by like a third-party company. All right, so the US has indicted the Snowflake hackers who extorted $2.5 million from 3 victims. This was, we talked about the Snowflake attack, and it was a big deal. This was targeted, I believe it was a lack of 2FA that allowed hackers to get in and start stealing information and potentially encrypting it. I think that in this case, it was merely stolen. Yep, stolen. And then it was ransomed. 3 people apparently paid this ransom, and it definitely seems like that was not a great idea. So we've got Waifu and Judish being arrested for this in Canada at the request of the United States. It's interesting that Idaho and Canada were the places where these arrests were taking place. But anyway, more information on this later as sentencing comes down and we see more specific charges. But interesting to see that some of these attacks have been localized in countries that are, you know, easily extraditable from, which seems like maybe kind of a not motivator to take place in some of these like huge breaches if you're in a country that extradites to the United States very easily, especially Canada. But I mean, again, we'll see what happens there. This, I cannot believe this is real. Is this a joke? So, all right, I have a Google Pixel and I'm interested in trying to do this. And I've obviously seen some of the live transcription things. Like, I think it's interesting, like, especially when you're on hold or like it's unclear, maybe like, cause the audio is not so great what they're saying, it'll do a transcription on the phone in real time. And I didn't really think too much about this because like, usually I use Signal for important calls. This is really only for businesses and stuff that are calling me. But apparently Google is now going to be running an analyzation layer on the transcription that is trying to warn you if there is a scam. So I mean, the features I'm talking about now are built into like Google Voice. They're not built into just like my regular phone. So it's trying to look for like patterns that might suggest that somebody is a scammer. So like asking for information or like, you know, like being really, I don't know, just like trying to use techniques that scammers typically do to like intimidate someone. I think that it's kind of funny to think that your phone might display this scam likely kind of like notification in the middle of a call and offer you the option to just like mash that end call button. The actual screen here that is pretty funny. Let me put it, there we go. So, oh, sorry, there we go. Yeah, so like having this pop up in the middle of a scam, first of all, I think it'd be really funny if like your friend calls you and asks you for money or something, or like asks you to buy tickets for something, and then they're like, I'll pay you back, and it just pops up, warning, scam likely. Your friend is unlikely to pay you back this money. I don't know how advanced this is going to be. You know, like I doubt it'll warn you about, you know, personal acquaintances, but it will be listening. You know, that's what kind of floors me. So I really do wonder if, like, you know, one of your acquaintances called and was asking about money or something, if this would pop up under like legitimate, you know, phone calls, if this would be like a false positive. So this is, again, pretty wild to me. Letting an AI listen in over your shoulder and like trusting it. Where does the data go? Is this training anything? Are like what is happening here? Like, is it going to another server to be processed, or is it processed locally? It says that all processing happens on the device, but I don't know. You know, I need to see how it works, and I would want to know a bit more about it before I would be excited about this. But yeah, with the increase in automated phishing and scams, I think it's interesting that Google could try to implement an automated system to detect maybe those automated scammers. So I feel like half of this news stream has just been like the cat and mouse game between like Google and various scams. All right, so following up on last week we talked about how these network attached storage devices were wide open to attack. There was a public exploit available, and that there was no fix that was going to be published. These are end of life. Well, huge surprise. As attackers have now targeted these devices with the public exploit code, and many of them have been exploited. There, as I said, is no fix. So these either need to be hidden behind a firewall or taken offline, with taken offline being the preferred method that is being suggested by most people. Because if you do even have this in a firewalled environment, you are still at risk for somebody being able to exploit this if they have access to your local network. So let's say an info stealer or an evil light bulb, you know, is lurking on your network looking for things that are easy to exploit. It'd be super, super simple to attack this and then use it as a beachhead for going after the rest of your network. So they are out there, they are unfixable, and you should destroy them. These basically are now devices that are just toxic. If they are located on a network, they are the weakest point of the network, guaranteed. So extra special attention on these vulnerable devices, because shockingly, the exploit code that we reported on last week was used to do a bad thing on the internet. Who could have possibly predicted that? All right, and now we have a case of lazy ransomware. So I was shocked when I started getting into computer science how quickly I was able to write a ransomware encryptor. Well, let me be specific. It was really easy to write a wiper. I think anybody could write a wiper. In fact, you can use that, you know, that popular little like emoji, like text face that just wipes the whole system if you really want to. But making ransomware is a little bit more complicated, right? You got, even though that was like also one of my first projects for computer science, I made like for learning C++, they're like, make a complete program. I'm like, all right. So I made like a simulated ransomware device, and it was really scary too, because it would encrypt a file. And if I selected the wrong thing, it would just do the whole operating system. But anyway, it's relatively easy to do this, but doing it in a way that actually gets you paid is really hard, because you have to manage all this additional stuff. So sometimes people cut corners, and this is what the ShrinkLocker ransomware strain did. They were basically just using the built-in BitLocker on Windows to be able to encrypt everything and then provide the contact details the victims need to get in touch with the attacker to, you know, pay them Bitcoin or whatever. So this is slow ransomware. It schedules tasks and it does all these other things. And it's basically based off of a 10-year-old VBS script. That is the mover and shaker behind this whole thing. Everything is outdated. It's all rickety. It's like the old space station. You know, like things are, you know, based on outdated code, but it's okay. It's still functioning. And what it does is still damaging enough that it was able to take down a healthcare provider. And it is able to be still pretty efficient at doing what it does. Now, the reason why you don't cut corners is because when you use something like BitLocker or whatever that's built into an operating system, there are fail-safes and other things built into it that allow you to roll back certain things you might have done by accident. Basically, it's designed to be a little bit more user-friendly than some of these like ransomware tools that leave the user absolutely no way of recovering the data. So because this like commercial program is doing the encryption, it's actually able to reverse it. So as a ransomware person, that is the worst case scenario, right? Like you try to ransomware someone and instead they just call the police, and then the police give them this decryptor, and boom, like, you know, they get all their data back and you don't get any money at all. Like, sucks for you. So what Bitdefender discovered was that there is a specific window of opportunity immediately after the removal of protectors from the BitLocker encrypted disk that lets you decrypt and recover the password set by the attacker, which is supposed to be random, and decrypt the data and be able to restore back to the previous state. Now, there are some caveats to this. One is, no, it does not work on other versions of like BitLocker. Like, you couldn't use this program to, for example, like recover the password from like your BitLocker installation that you forgot the password to. It doesn't work like that. However, the way that it does work allows you to basically go back and recover all this information that should not be recoverable because of some of the commercial features or the niceties built into BitLocker. So by cutting corners and using like commercially available software, the attacker did something smart. They did like living off the land. They only relied on things that kind of let them use a super old VBS script to wreak a lot of damage. But it also means that they were not able to protect against these sort of data recovery efforts that are actually pretty successful if an attacker cuts corners. So sometimes the random password isn't really so random, or in this case, there's a mechanism built into the program that they're using to conduct the attack that actually allows the victim to recover the information. So really good twist here. Again, anytime the attacker cuts corners, it gives defenders the opportunity to maybe recover the data. And that's exactly what happened here. So if you know anyone who was the victim of this attack, it literally just does its thing. And then rather than having like a customized like display, it just pops up with this like blue screen that just says BitLocker, enter the recovery key to get going again. And then has the relabels the drive as the contact information for the ransomware person. If you're not clear on what ransomware is going on, then this might confuse you because it doesn't look like ransomware, right? It just looks like the BitLocker screen. So by writing on the back of this program and kind of piggybacking off of it, the attacker got some benefit here. They were able to do a very lightweight living off the land attack that was pretty effective, but it also, in this case, also is going to prevent them from making money, probably. All right, and last up, we have a hacker behind one of the largest ever cryptocurrency heists getting a 5-year sentence. So we talked about the more lengthy sentence of the hacker who had gone after medical and also police. This is half of that sentence. So this is conspiracy to commit money laundering. And these sorts of crypto heists are so common, normally done by North Korea in order to fund their various illegal programs that they can't get money for otherwise. But, it happens all of the time. And money laundering is usually where people do get arrested for, do get in trouble or do get arrested. So, yeah, not really much to report here. I just wanted to contrast that with the earlier sentence of 10 years. Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, that's a lot. And we were kind of discussing how like some of these are being prosecuted very zealously, but I think any attack against critical infrastructure is going to be like more heavy-handed. And these sort of like cryptocurrency like scammers or people that are essentially committing money laundering after like stealing from an exchange or something, like those are getting half the sentence of people going after critical infrastructure. So, I mean, if you got the options of going after one or the two, it's pretty clear legally where the risk is. And I think that's the point of some of these more aggressive prosecutions. Getting ads pushed to your Neuralink while driving. I'm actually like with the invention, like, I got into Waymo and I realized very quickly that like, and I already knew this, like back when I worked at Uber very briefly, that the future was going to be subsidized by just like ads in your face. And I think that I can't even imagine how horrible a Neuralink ad would be, but I think that the future is going to be like automated cars where you can like pay a little bit for them to just shut up and stop blasting ads directly into your face as you're driving. But I mean, in New York and other places, I've already experienced this where like sometimes like Uber drivers will get extra income by displaying ads to you. It's real. It's an actual industry. So it's going to happen. And I hate that is probably a future prediction. Okay. All right, everyone. That is just about all we have. Oh, yes. Enabled by default on that Google call thing. No, it is currently enabled. It is currently disabled by default. So you have to opt into it. It is not listening to your phone conversations yet. Still, though, a little creepy. I don't know. Like, it definitely seems like having an AI listen over your shoulder. Like, they can say that it's all the processing is happening, but is there metadata being reported? Like, I don't know. There's just a lot of privacy questions for that. So before I'm excited to have an AI snooping over my shoulder and deciding whether or not my friends are scamming me, I think that maybe I need to learn a little bit more about where that information is going and if it's being used to train models. I'm not doing free work, Google. I don't know about that. All right, so that's all we have for today. If you enjoyed the stream, per always, you can go to varonis.com/Kody. That's Kody. Lets everyone know you like the stream, you want us to keep going, and it doesn't cost you a thing to do. You can also join us on our Wednesday stream where we're going to be going over hacking tools and also just answering Q&A questions. So see you guys then. The next major conference we're going to is going to be Chaos Communication. I think I talked about that a little bit last time, and that's exciting because I'm doing a talk on Meshtastic. So I have already hit up several Meshtastic communities asking them about security vulnerabilities. I think they're a little suspicious of me, but I'm beginning to win their trust, I hope. So I should have some more information I'm sharing ahead of time about, just like Meshtastic vulnerabilities, what people have observed and what I've learned from doing some research on it. So stay tuned for that, and I will see everybody next Wednesday. Goodbye, everyone.